At the Christmas Eve dinner, my granddaughter, only 13 years old, suddenly fainted and had to be rushed to the hospital. While we were all worried, my daughter-in-law posted online, "I finally got rid of the attention-seeking brat." That's when I started planning everything. When she returned home and found what was on the kitchen table, she started screaming like a maniac. I was standing in my small kitchen. The sweet aroma of apple cider bubbling on the stove filled me with warmth. The smell of cinnamon mixed with that of ripe cranberries. Like a reminder of past Christmases, when the whole family gathered and everything seemed perfect. I was gently stirring the pot of hot cider, careful not to spill the bright red liquid like a small flame. Beside me, Chloe, my 3-year-old granddaughter, was carefully placing the freshly fried apple fritters on a platter. Her small hands trembled slightly as she sprinkled the confectioner's sugar, each grain shining as if it were white snow. "Grandma, your fritters look beautiful," she said, with a clear, cheerful voice, her brown eyes full of happiness. I smiled, stroking her shiny black hair, feeling a warmth that filled my chest. To me, Chloe wasn't just my granddaughter. She was my whole world, the only light I had left since my husband, George, passed away. The doorbell rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. The guests began to arrive, bringing laughter, lively conversation, and Merry Christmas Eve greetings. My small house in Boston filled with life. My cousin Diane walked in and hugged me tight. Her jasmine perfume reminded me of my younger years. Michael, my brother-in-law, with his open smile, gave me a strong hug as he talked non-stop about the turkey stuffing his wife had prepared. Christmas carols played cheerfully from the old speaker, blending with the delicious smell of the roast turkey baking in the oven. I went back and forth, greeting everyone, checking that everything was ready. It was Christmas Eve, a night for family, for togetherness. I wanted everything to be perfect, not just for me, but also for Chloe, so she would feel the love I always wanted to give her. But then the front door opened once more, and the atmosphere seemed to tighten a little, at least inside me. David, my son, and Veronica, my daughter-in-law. I walked in. They were late. As always, Veronica stood out in her tight, shiny red dress, as if she were going to a fancy party downtown and not a family gathering. She passed by me. She gave me a superficial hug. Her lips curved into a polite, unemotional smile. "Hi, Mum," she said with a light voice, and immediately joined David's friends, whom I barely knew. David kissed me on the cheek and quickly asked, "Everything okay?" "Mum?" I forced a smile, although a slight unease squeezed my chest. I watched him walk away and wondered, since when had such a distance opened up between us? I turned my gaze back to Chloe, and my heart sank. She was timidly approaching Veronica, carefully holding an apple fritter in her small hands, still with sugar on her fingers. "Aunt Veronica, try Grandma's fritter. It's delicious," she said enthusiastically, as if offering a precious gift. Veronica looked at the fritter. Then she looked down at her expensive dress. "Thanks, but I'm watching my figure," she replied coldly, immediately turning to talk to a friend, leaving Chloe standing there alone with the fritter in her hand. I saw how my granddaughter's small shoulders tensed, and the light in her eyes faded like a lamp someone had dimmed. I wanted to approach her, hug her, tell her it was nothing, but I held back. I didn't want to make things tenser. I just walked past her, patted her shoulder, and whispered, "Come on, help me set the table." "Honey." Dinner began. The whole family gathered around the old oak table that my husband had loved so much. I served roast turkey with delicious gravy and a creamy potato casserole. Everyone raised their glasses. The sound of toasts mixed with cheerful laughter and congratulations. Veronica, as always, became the center of attention. She told jokes in that sharp voice of hers, making David's friends roar with laughter. I looked around the table, trying to enjoy the moment, but my eyes couldn't leave Chloe. She was sitting silently in a corner, her plate almost untouched. She moved the slice of turkey back and forth as if just pretending to eat. Her face was pale, and those brown eyes that always sparkled now looked dull. I felt a wave of worry rise inside me. But I tried to calm myself, thinking maybe she was just tired from the commotion. Then, in an instant, Chloe gently tugged my sleeve. She leaned into me and whispered in a voice so low I had to strain to hear her. "Grandma, my stomach hurts." I felt my heart stop for a second. I placed my hand on her forehead and noticed an unusual heat. "Wait a moment, sweetie," I said, trying to keep calm, although I was anguished inside. I got up with the intention of going to the kitchen for a cup of ginger ale, that remedy my mother used with me when I was a child. But before I could take a step, a sharp laugh resonated from the other side of the table. It was Veronica. She was staring at us intently. Her red lips curved into a mocking smile. "The drama again," she said in a tone so loud that everyone turned to look. "Oh, Martha, don't indulge her so much. This kid always wants to play the victim to ruin the party." The atmosphere froze. Some relatives laughed awkwardly, trying to hide the tension. David, sitting next to Veronica, looked visibly uncomfortable. "Come on, Veronica. Don't say that," he mumbled, though his voice was weak, unable to stop his wife. I looked at Chloe. Her small shoulders were trembling. Her head bowed over her plate. Her hands clenched under the table. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. She didn't say anything. She only endured in silence. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, as if someone was squeezing it hard. I wanted to scream, defend her, but I held back, fearing that a single word would make everything worse. Instead, I took her hand and squeezed it gently, like a silent promise that I wouldn't leave her alone. David, perhaps aware of the tense atmosphere, turned up the music. The carols filled the air again, hiding the uncomfortable silence. People resumed their conversations, toasts, and laughter, trying to pretend things were normal. I got up with the intention of taking Chloe to her room so she could rest and I could check on her better. But just as I put my hand on her shoulder, everything fell apart. Chloe swayed. Her brown eyes opened wide and rolled back. She fell to the floor, dragging the tablecloth with her. Wine glasses crashed. The sound of breaking glass echoed like a scream in the middle of the silence. I screamed, my voice broken by panic. "Chloe, my child." I knelt beside her, my hands trembling as I held her pale face. The music suddenly cut out. Everyone stood up, startled. Chairs scraped. Screams filled the room. David ran toward us. He knelt beside me and called his daughter. "Chloe, wake up, please." I looked at her. Her eyes were closed, her breathing weak. My heart pounded forcefully as if it wanted to burst from my chest. I didn't know what to do. I just hugged her desperately, praying silently for a miracle. And then, in the middle of all that chaos, I heard Veronica's voice. She crossed her arms and sighed with annoyance. She looked down where Chloe lay, motionless on the floor, and said with a chilling calm as if talking about the weather, "See, I told you she always exaggerates." Those words were like a direct stab to my heart. I looked up, meeting her cold, empty eyes, feeling the whole world collapsing around me. My son-in-law, Michael, who always kept calm in difficult times, quickly pulled out his phone and called 911. "The ambulance is coming." "Martha," he said with a firm but serene voice, becoming a steady point in the middle of the storm. I heard the siren in the distance, and every second felt eternal. When the white ambulance stopped in front of the house, the paramedics rushed in and placed Chloe on a stretcher. I held my granddaughter's hand tightly, not wanting to let go for an instant. "Can I go with her?" I asked, almost pleading. The nurse nodded, and I got into the vehicle in a hurry, my heart pounding so hard it seemed about to break my chest. Inside the narrow ambulance, I sat next to Chloe, holding her ice-cold hand. The lights of the Boston streets passed by the window, blurred by the tears I couldn't hold back. I looked at her face, her lips pressed tight. And at that moment, I wanted to shout to the whole world that I couldn't bear to lose another loved one. George, my husband, had been gone for 7 years, and Chloe was all I had left. The only light in a house full of memories. I whispered, even though I knew she couldn't hear me. "I'm here, my love. I'm not going anywhere." The ambulance stopped in front of the hospital, and the cold hallway lights blinded me. The smell of disinfectant turned my stomach. The nurses pushed Chloe's stretcher toward the emergency room, and the door slammed shut in front of me like a wall, separating me from my granddaughter. I stood there motionless, feeling the world shrink to the dry sound of that door. I wanted to run after her, stay by her side, but my legs didn't respond. I could only stay still, watching, praying in silence. David and Veronica arrived shortly after. David paced back and forth in the waiting room, pale phone glued to his ear. "Diane." Chloe fell. "No. Mom is here." "I don't know. The doctor hasn't said anything yet," he said in a trembling voice. A mixture of worry and panic. I looked at him, wanting to hug him, tell him everything would be all right. But I couldn't. My soul felt tied in a knot. Not just for Chloe, but for the helplessness of seeing my son, not knowing what to do. Veronica, on the other hand, sat in a plastic chair, crossed her legs, and tapped the floor with her heel. Annoyed. She took out her phone, checked her makeup, and muttered in frustration. The whole Christmas Eve night ruined. I told you she was just faking it. Her words were yet another stab. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe she was capable of saying something like that. While my granddaughter was fighting for her life, I turned around facing her, my voice trembling with rage. Veronica, please shut up. My granddaughter is in there. She smiled disdainfully, her eyes cold as ice. Your granddaughter is also a burden on my husband. David, exhausted, intervened. Veronica, that's enough. But his voice was weak, without the strength to stop her. I turned away, avoiding her gaze, fearing that if I looked at her for one more second, I would say something I would later regret. Time passed slowly in the waiting room. Every tick-tock of the wall clock was like a hammer blow to my head. I sat, clasping my hands tightly, trying to keep calm. The image of Chloe collapsing to the floor repeated over and over in my mind. Every detail, like a slow-motion movie. I blamed myself. I should have realized sooner. I should have taken her to the hospital as soon as she said her stomach hurt. I looked around. The cold plastic chairs, the completely white walls, and suddenly the loneliness hit me hard. I had already lost George. I had already lost those days when the family was complete. And now I couldn't bear the thought of losing Chloe, too. Then the emergency room door opened. A young doctor, his white coat stained with sweat, came out and called loudly, "Chloe Navarro's family." David and I stood up immediately, almost running toward him. The doctor looked at us with a calm but grave voice. She has acute appendicitis. It was about to burst. We need to operate immediately. Luckily, you brought her in time, a little later, and her life would have been in danger. His words were like a slap. I felt my legs give way. I had to lean on the wall to keep from falling. David dropped into a chair, covering his face with his hands, his voice broken. It was my fault. I should have listened to her. I looked at Veronica, hoping to see some regret, some worry. But she was just there, arms crossed, without saying a word, staring fixedly at the floor. The nurses wheeled Chloe out on a stretcher to take her to the operating room. She had regained a little consciousness. Her tired eyes barely opened. "Grandma," she whispered weakly. I ran after her. I took her hand. That small hand, now as cold as ice. "I'm here." "Honey," I murmured, trying to smile, even though tears blurred my vision. "Everything is going to be all right." I squeezed her hand tightly, as if by doing so, I could keep her with me forever. The operating room door closed. I stayed there, motionless, watching her figure disappear behind the opaque glass. David went to handle the hospital paperwork, leaving me alone with Veronica in the waiting room. She stood up and said in an annoyed voice, "I need to go outside for some air." I didn't answer. I just nodded, grateful that she was leaving. I stayed alone in that row of cold chairs, listening to footsteps, nurses' whispers. I took out my phone, thinking of texting Diane to tell her what had happened. But a social media notification popped up. I opened the app and my heart stopped. The most recent post at the top was from Veronica. It was a selfie. Her radiant smile. Behind her, the Christmas tree shining in my house. Beneath it, the sentence, "Finally got rid of the dramatic brat. Happy peaceful Christmas Eve, everyone." I stared at the screen, feeling the world collapse. The noise of the hospital, the footsteps, the voices, everything disappeared. Only Veronica's mocking face remained. And those cruel words like fire burning my mind. Sitting in the cold plastic chair in the waiting room, the light from the phone illuminated my face. It was as icy as the fluorescent lights above my head. I stared at Veronica's post. I read it over and over, hoping I had seen wrong, that it was a nightmare. But no, every word was clear, cold, and ruthless. Chloe, my granddaughter, who at that moment was fighting between life and death in the operating room, had been called the dramatic brat by her own stepmother. I felt an unbearable weight on my chest, as if a huge stone was crushing my heart and preventing me from breathing. My hands were trembling as I slid down to the comments section. The lines appeared one after another, and every sentence was like a hammer hitting my mind. A friend of Veronica's, a woman named Skylar, wrote, "Yeah, finally peace. Let's break out the wine to celebrate." A friend, another person, perhaps her cousin, added, "I knew it. She only knows how to play the victim. Enjoy Christmas night. Honey." Thousands of laughing emojis and likes appeared, like an invisible crowd laughing at my granddaughter's pain. Not a single friend or relative of Veronica's asked about Chloe's condition. Not a question. Not a hint of worry. Only indifference and a cruelty disguised as fake smiles on social media. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Not from the hospital's cold, but from the hard truth that the people around Veronica didn't consider Chloe part of their family. The trembling in my body suddenly stopped. A different kind of coldness. Not that of pain, but of determination, spread throughout my being. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I couldn't let emotions dominate me. Not now. I pressed the screenshot button over and over, carefully saving Veronica's entire post. Every comment, every reaction. I opened my email and sent all those images to myself with the subject line "evidence." Every time I pressed send, I felt like I was building a protective wall for Chloe, even if it was just in my mind. I didn't know yet what I would do with that evidence, but I was clear that I wouldn't let this cruelty pass in silence. If this story has touched you, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with others. It helps me grow and reach more people. David returned with 2 paper cups of coffee. The smooth aroma mixed with the cold air of the waiting room. He looked at me frowning and asked worriedly, "Mum, what's wrong? What did the doctor say?" I didn't answer immediately. I just handed him the phone with Veronica's post still on the screen. I watched his face. Every small change. First it was confusion. Then his eyes widened in disbelief. Finally, his face turned red, a mixture of shame and rage. "It can't be," he murmured in a trembling voice. "She can't have done that." But he knew deep down he understood it was true. David squeezed the phone hard as if he wanted to destroy it. He got up and rushed out of the room. I heard his voice in the hallway, furious but contained. "Veronica, what the hell are you doing?" I stayed seated without following him, not wanting to hear more. I knew that conversation would lead nowhere. Minutes later, David returned alone, with a defeated expression. He sat down next to me, avoiding looking me in the eyes. "She said it was just a joke," he murmured. "Her friends always joke like that." I looked at my son, the boy I raised and loved for so many years, and I felt a distance impossible to bridge. He didn't dare face the truth nor defend his own daughter. David's weakness more than Veronica's post was what truly broke my heart. I didn't argue. I just nodded and took the phone from his hands. At that moment, I understood something with absolute clarity. David would never be fully on Chloe's side. He was too weak with Veronica, too easily manipulated. From now on, I would have to act on my own. I would be the one to protect Chloe, just as I promised George before he left. I looked toward the long hallway where the fluorescent light still shone coldly, and a silent oath took shape in my heart. I would not allow Veronica to hurt my granddaughter once more. An older nurse passed by me with silver hair pulled back in a high bun. She stopped when she saw me sitting alone with a look full of compassion. "Would you like a blanket?" "Mom?" she asked softly. "Hospital nights are very cold." I smiled weakly and thanked her. The small kindness of a stranger, even if it was just a question, made me feel warmer than any words from my own family. It highlighted even more Veronica's cruelty and David's indifference. I adjusted my coat, trying to conserve the little warmth left in my chest. Then the light above the operating room door went out. My heart stopped for an instant. The doctor came out, his face less tense, though still serious. "The surgery was a success," he said firmly. "We acted in time. The girl will be moved to the recovery room." I let out a sigh, as if the whole world had stepped back from the abyss. David jumped up and thanked the doctor non-stop, but I just nodded silently. His words were like a ray of light, although my mind wasn't entirely there. When the nurses wheeled Chloe's stretcher out, I saw her pale face, her eyes closed, and my heart sank again. She had survived, but I knew my battle was just beginning. I stood, watching the stretcher disappear around the corner of the hallway, and in my mind, the image of Veronica's post continued to burn. Those cruel words, her fake smile, and the indifference of those around her were like a fire urging me to act. I squeezed the phone in my hands where I kept the evidence, and felt a new strength growing inside me. My promise had been sealed, not with words, but with the determination of a grandmother willing to do anything to protect her granddaughter. I sat in the chair next to Chloe's bed in the recovery room. The heart monitor emitted constant soft beeps. Looking at her sleeping, pale face, the memories of Veronica's treatment came back one after another like a slow-motion movie. I remembered the first day Veronica moved into our house. Chloe, who was only 10 years old then, spent the whole afternoon in her room drawing carefully on a piece of coloured paper. It was a drawing of our house with red-tiled roofs and a bright Christmas tree in the yard. In the centre, she drew 3 people holding hands: David, Veronica, and herself, all smiling. Chloe brought the drawing timidly, her eyes full of hope. "Miss Veronica, I made this for you," she said excitedly. "Veronica, busy tidying her closet full of designer shoes. Barely looked at it before placing it on the nearest table. Yes, it's pretty. Now, let me finish arranging this, she replied in a cold voice without interest. The drawing stayed there, forgotten, until I quietly picked it up and stored it in my room drawer. I still remember Chloe's disappointed look, how she bowed her head and her small shoulders trembled. I convinced myself that Veronica just needed time to adjust. But now remembering it, I know that was the first crack. Then I recalled a morning a few months later when I walked into the living room and saw Veronica taking down the photos hanging on the wall. Those photos were valuable memories of our family, especially a large one where Catherine, David's late wife, held Chloe during her baptism. Catherine smiled sweetly, her eyes full of the love she felt for her daughter. I was paralyzed and asked, "Veronica, what are you doing?" She turned around and smiled with a sweetness so fake it chilled my blood. "I just want to refresh the space a bit, Mom," she said softly, as if trying to comfort me. "Let's leave the past behind. It will be better for Chloe, too." But I clearly saw the satisfaction in her gaze when she took the photo down, as if by doing so, she erased Catherine's image to take her place. I didn't say anything. I just kept the photo in my room. But inside me, a feeling of unease began to grow. I wondered if I was being too sensitive or if that was really a sign of something worse. Another, even more bitter memory came back to my mind. It was a night when Veronica decided to cook a spicy chili, a famous sauce from Texas. She was in the kitchen, proud, showing off the family recipe she had learned to David. The smell was delicious. But we all knew that Chloe couldn't eat anything spicy. Her face would turn red, and she would start coughing with just a little chili. When the food was served, Chloe looked at the steaming plate with eyes full of confusion. She didn't dare touch it. She just looked at me silently as if asking for help. I quickly went to the kitchen and prepared a bowl of macaroni and cheese for her favorite food. When I brought it to her, Veronica saw it and said to David in a soft voice, but full of mockery, "Look, your daughter only enjoys simple things. I spent all afternoon making this." David smiled awkwardly without saying anything, and I felt my heart squeeze. I wanted to shout that the child wasn't picky, that she was just a little girl who needed affection. But I stayed quiet, like so many times before, to maintain the peace. Then I remembered the day Chloe won first place in the school's fall festival drawing contest. She ran home clutching her blue ribbon and a bookstore gift card, her face beaming like the sun. "Grandma, I won," she shouted, showing me the ribbon. David, who was rarely home, congratulated her and hugged her proudly. But Veronica, sitting in a corner painting her nails, just looked at her and said, "I bet everyone else drew really badly." Her tone was soft, like a casual comment, but I saw Chloe's smile suddenly disappear. She bowed her head and the ribbon in her hands lost all its shine. I hugged her and whispered that I was very proud of her. But I knew Veronica's words had left a small scar on the child's heart. The monitor's beep brought me back to the present. I adjusted Chloe's blanket, pulling it up carefully to her chin. Those fragments of memory which before seemed only small cracks, uncomfortable moments that I tried to ignore for David's happiness, now made sense. I had convinced myself that Veronica just needed time, that she would learn to love Chloe. But after that cruel post, I realized I was wrong. Those cracks weren't accidental. They were part of a larger picture of a calculated cruelty disguised with fake smiles and sweet words. I felt a silent rage, but more than that, a deep pain. Pain for not having seen it sooner. Pain for having allowed Chloe to suffer so much. Chloe moved slightly and slowly opened her eyes like a ray of sunshine filtering through dark clouds. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. I took her hand and squeezed it gently, trying to transmit some warmth to her. "I'm here, my love," I said sweetly, though I felt a storm inside. Chloe looked around the room. Her innocent eyes scanned the white walls and the cold medical equipment. Then she looked up and asked me a question that squeezed my heart. "Grandma, did Aunt Veronica come?" I froze, not knowing what to answer. Looking into her clear eyes, I saw a fragile hope, an immense desire to be loved by that woman whom she still called Aunt. But I couldn't lie to her. I couldn't tell her that Veronica had been here worried about her, because the truth was she never showed up. She didn't even ask about her stepdaughter. I just stroked her hair tenderly and smiled sadly. "Rest, my love," I said, my voice breaking. In that silence, my determination turned to iron. Veronica would never again have the opportunity to get close enough to hurt this child. A week later, I took Chloe home. David was driving, but Veronica wasn't there. He said she had the flu in an evasive tone, as if hiding something. I didn't ask more. I just nodded and helped Chloe inside. The house still held the cold air of that interrupted party. I had already cleaned up the remnants of the broken glasses, but the feeling of emptiness was still there, like a hidden ghost in every corner. I looked around and saw the Christmas tree still standing in the corner of the living room, the twinkling lights only making my chest feel heavier. David accompanied Chloe to her room, carefully helping her lie down. He stayed for a moment. He asked, "How are you feeling? Do you need anything?" But his eyes kept looking at the watch on his wrist as if counting the seconds to leave. Before going out, he put a wad of bills in my hand and said hurriedly, "Mum, buy the child vitamins. Veronica and I are going to Palm Springs for a few days so she can clear her head." I looked at the money without saying anything. I just nodded. His words had no warmth. They sounded like a soulless duty fulfilled. I put the money in my pocket, but a deep disappointment arose within me. My son, whom I raised with all my love, now seemed only to want to run away from his responsibilities. The following days, the house became strangely silent. It was just Chloe and me, the two of us together in calm. I prepared chicken noodle soup for her, her favorite dish since she was a child. The aroma of the broth mixed with cilantro and lemon made her smile. Although her smile was still weak, I sat by her bed and read her stories from the old book that George used to read to David when he was little. We watched classic movies on the old television, and Chloe's laughter filled the room when the protagonist did something clumsy. The absence of David and Veronica, even if temporary, made the house seem to breathe again. I felt a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. But deep down, I knew it was only the calm before the storm. When Chloe was better and could move around the house alone, I decided to go out for some fresh air. I walked to the bakery. Beth's Sweetheart Bakery, my best friend since my youth. The smell of freshly baked bread and toasted coffee welcomed me as soon as I crossed the door. Beth, with her silver hair pulled back in a high bun and her warm smile, saw me and waved her hand. "Martha, come, come," she called, taking me to the small office behind the counter. She poured me a cup of hot latte, whose soft aroma enveloped me like a hug. In front of me, she placed a warm golden croissant. "Eat, you look tired," she said, with a look full of affection. I told Beth everything from the terrifying Christmas night to Veronica's cruel post. She listened in silence, sometimes shaking her head or clucking her tongue, her kind eyes full of understanding. When I mentioned Veronica's attitude, Beth sighed. "I never liked that girl since the first time David brought her here." Her eyes looked at everything as if she were putting a price on it. Not an ounce of affection. Her words touched a deep part of my heart where I had tried to bury my own doubts about Veronica. We stayed silent for a while, looking out the window at the neighbors passing by with bags full to start the day. The everyday calm of Boston made me feel relieved, if only for a moment. Suddenly, Beth turned to me, her eyes sparkling as if she had just remembered something important. "Martha," she said slowly, thoughtfully, "I remember the day your husband, Mr. George, made his will. He was very worried about little Chloe's future. I think the house. He left it to her, didn't he?" Beth's question was like a lightning bolt directly to my mind. I froze, feeling time stop. Memories of George flooded me, clear and vivid. I remembered that day when he sat at the dining room table, took my hand firmly, and said in a firm but serene voice, "I want to make sure that no matter what happens, our Chloe always has a home. You will take care of that for me, Martha." At that moment, it was just a promise between spouses. But now, those words had become a light, showing me the way. I quickly thanked Beth and almost ran back home, my heart pounding hard. I couldn't wait another second. Upon entering the room, I went straight to George's old mahogany chest, where he kept his most precious objects. I opened the lid, and a smell of mothballs and old paper enveloped me, bringing with it all the memories of the man I loved all my life. Inside was his favorite clothing, still with a faint scent of him. There was also our yellowed wedding photo album, and the letters he wrote me when we were young, with crooked handwriting full of love. I carefully took them out, placing them aside, my hands trembling as if touching something sacred. At the bottom of the chest, under a faded linen cloth, I found a wad of documents tied with a blue ribbon. I opened it, trembling, my breath catching. The first line on the thick sheet, sealed with a red stamp, jumped out at me. Last will and testament of George Navarro. But they don't hate you. And do you hate me for causing so much trouble? Hate you, Isabel. You are the best thing I have in this world. She smiled. And for the first time in hours, she seemed to relax. Good night, Grandma. Good night, my angel. I turned off the light and closed the door halfway. I went downstairs to the living room. My phone was blowing up. 10 missed calls from Ethan. 5 from Lauren. 3 text messages. I read them. Ethan, Mom. Isabel is gone. Is she with you? Please answer. Ethan. Mum. I need to know if my daughter is okay. Don't play with this. Lauren. Martha. Please tell Isabel we love her. That everything is going to be fine. We just want her to come back. I wrote a single message. Isabel is with me. She's fine. We'll talk tomorrow. Immediately. The phone started ringing. Ethan. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the notebook where Robert used to write his reflections. I kept it in the coffee table drawer. I turned the pages until I found one he had written shortly before he died. It said, Victoria, if you ever feel lost, remember this. The most valuable thing we have is not this house. It's not the money. It's the ability to look at ourselves in the mirror and know that we lived with dignity. Never allow anyone, not even our son, to take that away from you. I love you, Frank. I closed the notebook, and I knew exactly what I had to do. I couldn't sleep that night. I thought of all the women who must have kept silent out of fear, to maintain family peace, to avoid being the problem. As I tell all this, I wonder where you might be listening to me. Write the name of your city in the comments. I want to know how many of us have had to choose between family and our own dignity. I woke up early the next morning. Isabel was still asleep. I made coffee. I sat in the garden. The azaleas needed trimming. Yes, but they were still beautiful. At 8:00 the morning, I heard a car pull up in front of the house. Ethan and Lauren had returned from Miami Beach. And everything completely normal, she stated. Don't let them know you're watching. The best evidence comes when they feel safe. That night, I sat in my study with headphones on, watching the day's recordings. Their return from the errand. The conversation in the kitchen as they unpacked groceries. He's too quiet, Elena said, her voice tight with worry. It's suspicious. We need another approach. Julian leaned against the counter, arms crossed. The direct hit didn't work. Time for the indirect hit. I saved the file, dated it, and labeled it Evidence Log Entry 1. The following days allowed me to build my case. February 28th. Julian discussed contingency plans. March 1st. Elena worried that I was acting strangely. March 2nd. They looked up lawyers to challenge my mental competency. March 3rd. Julian's search history showed declarations of parental incapacity. Every conversation was documented, saved, and organized into folders by topic. I watched them conspire against me with the methodical patience of someone building a legal case brick by brick. Veronica sent weekly reports, their social media activity, online purchases, public record searches, the digital trail of people preparing for war. On March 4th, I decided to give them exactly what they wanted. At breakfast, I rubbed my temples. I've been feeling so tired lately. Their heads snapped up like bloodhounds on a scent. That night at dinner, I feigned forgetting where I had left my reading glasses. I've been very forgetful. Elena leaned forward, feigning concern. Maybe you should see a doctor. Dad. It's normal at your age, Julian added casually. but it's definitely worth checking out. I nodded, playing the confused old man. Later, reviewing the recording, I saw them celebrate my confession as if it were a gift. On the night of March 18th, after 3 weeks of evidence, dozens of conversations, and hundreds of hours of recording, I opened my phone and found Harrison Cole's number. Tomorrow, we would build a strategy. It was time to move from documentation to action. The articles appeared on March 5th. I found them scattered on the kitchen counter that morning. Printed pages about cognitive decline, the early symptoms of dementia, and the importance of medical evaluation for seniors. Elena was by the coffee maker watching my reaction. I found this online. I thought it might be helpful to understand what's been happening with you. I picked up the first article and skimmed it with appropriate confusion. I suppose reading wouldn't hurt. Knowledge is power, Julian added from the doorway. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I took the articles to my study, photographed each page, and filed them as evidence. Psychological manipulation documented. They were constructing a narrative. The confused old man who needed intervention, who couldn't be trusted to handle his own affairs. Over the next 3 days, more articles appeared. Residences for people with dementia. The importance of power of attorney. Financial management for those experiencing cognitive difficulties. Each one was carefully placed where I would find it. Each one was photographed and filed. On March 8th, the surveillance cameras caught them in the living room, believing they were alone. "We need an expert opinion," Julian said. "Someone who can evaluate him professionally." "A psychologist?" Elena's voice held equal parts hope and guilt. "I know someone. Dr. Elias Thorne, a clinical psychologist specializing in elderly cognition. We set up a casual lunch. I introduce them. Elias makes observations. Will he do it ethically? Will he be objective? If your father shows symptoms, Elias documents them. If not, Julian shrugged, then we'll know for sure. I watched this conversation 3 times, taking notes. The tension was escalating. They were seeking external validation for their version of events. On March 10th, I met Julian for lunch at a cafe in Coconut Grove. He had suggested it that morning so we can get to know each other better without the stress of work. And I accepted with appropriate gratitude. Dr. Elias Thorne joined us 15 minutes in. "Hey, this is my friend Elias." I mentioned him, the psychologist. We shook hands. Elias, about 40-something, professional demeanor, cautious eyes. "Julian told me about you. Successful sale. Congratulations." We talked for an hour. My performance was impeccable. I occasionally searched for words, asked Elias to repeat questions, and commented on my forgetfulness. I didn't exaggerate, just a hint of confusion. Elias maintained professional distance, but I caught him watching me, evaluating, cataloguing. "It was a pleasure meeting you," Elias said as lunch ended, handing me his card. "If you ever want to discuss professional topics, I'm available." I put the card in my pocket. Evidence, not service. That night, The surveillance cameras recorded Julian calling Elias from the living room. The speakerphone on. "What did you think?" Julian asked impatiently. "He's 63. Some age-appropriate variation in memory isn't unusual." Elias's voice was carefully neutral. "I can't make clinical assessments based on an informal lunch conversation. But if there were genuine concerns, I could evaluate him formally. With his consent. Yes. But Julian, I'm not comfortable being part of this. If you have legitimate concerns about his well-being, there are proper channels." "Sure. I'm just exploring options." After hanging up, Julian's face darkened. "We'll find someone else." I saved that recording with particular satisfaction. Even when they tried to corrupt professionals, ethics intervened. From March 12th to 17th, I continued my performance. Small errors, confusion, repeated questions. On the 15th, at breakfast, I asked Elena about the plans we had discussed the night before, feigning forgetfulness. Her eyes lit up with excitement, barely concealed. The surveillance cameras recorded everything. Their conversations about my decline, Julian researching commitment procedures, Elena worrying that things were moving too slowly. On March 18th, I adjusted my strategy. At dinner, I casually commented that I had been thinking about updating my will. Julian suggested it given the business sale. I want to make sure everything is in order. A dead silence fell. Then Elena, trying to sound nonchalant. "That's responsible. Dad, when are you meeting with him? He'll be preparing the documents soon. Making sure you're well taken care of." I left the words hanging in the air. Bait in a trap. After dinner, I retreated to my study. The surveillance cameras recorded them in the kitchen. They spoke in low voices, but the microphone caught everything. "He mentioned the will," Elena said, barely containing her hope. "That doesn't mean he's changing it in our favor." Julian's voice held a warning. "It could be the opposite. But if he really is confused, if we document that he's not competent when making changes, then we challenge them later. Either way, we need more evidence of his decline. Real evidence, not just observations." They talked for 40 minutes, planning how to document my supposed incompetence. Video, everything. Record strange behavior. Build a case for incapacity that would invalidate any legal change against their interests. I watched them celebrate their cleverness, pouring wine and toasting to progress. They thought they were winning. I closed the laptop, opened my phone, and searched for Harrison Cole's number. 3 weeks of recordings, conversations, plans, attempts at manipulation, psychological warfare, all captured with perfect digital clarity. Tomorrow, we would discuss how weeks of evidence could be turned into a legal strategy, how surveillance could be a tool for pressure, how their own words could destroy them. I had documented their plan with the same methodical patience they had used on mine. Only I had done it better. With more detail. With more strategy. It was time to move to the next phase. It was time to show them what happened when they underestimated a man who built an empire from scratch, who understood that true power lay in preparation, documentation, and knowing exactly when to strike. I texted Harrison, "I have new compelling evidence. Need an urgent meeting. He responded in minutes. Friday at 10, 0 inches the morning. Bring everything. I hung up the phone. Through the study window, the moonlight painted the lawn silver. In the house around me, they slept soundly, believing they were the architects of my ruin. They had no idea they were building their own. The morning light streamed through the study windows. March 19th at 8, I picked up the phone and dialed Harrison Cole's direct number. He answered on the second ring. Mr. Sterling, your message said you had evidence. Weeks of it. Surveillance recordings. Conversations. Attempts at manipulation. All documented. I need to meet today. This afternoon at 2, bring everything. I spent the morning organizing it. I created a folder on my laptop called Legal Evidence Package. Surveillance files copied, organized by date and severity. Printed transcripts of their most damning conversations. Julian talking about competency challenges. Elena worried about my suspicious silence. Both celebrating their supposed progress toward controlling my assets. Veronica's weekly reports went into a manila envelope, underlined and tabbed. I loaded everything onto 2 USB drives, one for Harrison and one backup. At 2, I sat across from Harrison in his conference room. The USB drive and documents between us, like exhibits in a trial. He watched 3 hours of recording, read all the transcripts, and studied Veronica's behavioral analysis. Finally, he leaned back, fingers interlaced. This is extensive. Multiple legal options, restraining orders, civil lawsuit, criminal charges for attempted poisoning. He tapped the trust document I had mentioned. But first, we protect your assets. Irrevocable living trust. How does that work? Assets are transferred to the trust. It becomes an independent legal entity. An independent trustee administers it. You set the conditions for beneficiary access. Once signed, they are untouchable. Not even you can modify them. He pulled out a notepad and began sketching the structure. We'll make it bulletproof. They won't be able to access it through lawsuits, manipulate the administrators, or effectively challenge it. How long would it take? A week. If we act now, you'll transfer the majority of your assets. Keep enough liquidity for personal use. We'll establish strict conditions for Elena's eventual access. What conditions? Harrison smiled. A sharp professional grin. Whatever you want. Age requirements. Financial independence. Absence of pending lawsuits. In short, any measure that ensures she cannot access the money through coercion or fraud. Over the next 5 days, we built an impenetrable fortress around my wealth. March 20th. Trust structure designed. $25 million transferred to the trust. $5 million kept liquid for my use. Elena could access it at age 45, 9 years from now, if she demonstrated 5 years of financial independence and had no civil or criminal cases against her for financial reasons. On March 23rd, a meeting with Florida Fiduciary Services, 2 fiduciary officers, professional and impartial, explained their role. They would follow this document to the letter. No family pressure, no manipulation, no exceptions. March 24th. Final signing. Harrison's conference room again, but this time with a notary and fiduciary officers present. The documents lay across the table like a treaty ending a war. I signed each page, initialed and dated. The notary officially sealed each signature. "Your assets are protected," Harrison said as I put the copies in a leather folder. "She cannot manipulate, coerce, or sue you for them. The trust is irrevocable. Case closed." I drove home with a feeling I hadn't felt since February. Power, control, security. At home, life continued its strange theatre. They still knew nothing of the trust. The surveillance cameras recorded their casual conversations about the inheritance, their certainty that eventually my money would be theirs. March 28th. Breakfast. Buttered toast. Elena mentioned "when we inherit," as if it were inevitable. That night, Julian's laptop search history, how to challenge a will in Florida. I decided to tell them on April 1st, an auspicious date for plans to unravel. On March 31st, I texted both of them. Family meeting tomorrow. 10:00 the morning. In the living room. Important. Harrison had advised doing it in public or with witnesses. They could become aggressive. "My house," I replied. "My rules." The cameras would record everything. April 1st arrived. A clear, bright day. I set up my laptop connected to the television with the surveillance footage ready. At 10, they entered the living room. A palpable, nervous energy in the air. I stood. They sat. The sofa was lower than I was, establishing a hierarchy. I have made decisions about my estate. I filed the trust document. I have created an irrevocable living trust. Their attention sharpened. I explained systematically. $25 million transferred. Independent trustee. Conditions of access. Minimum age 45. Financial independence. No pending lawsuits. I watched their faces register comprehension. "What?" Elena's voice cracked. "Are you cutting me out? I am protecting my assets from manipulation." Julian leaped up from the sofa. "All this over the restaurant. A mistake." "And you?" "A mistake." I picked up the remote and hit play. Their voices filled the room. Surveillance footage. Them talking about my competency issues. Planning to document my decline. Celebrating their progress toward the inheritance. "You spied on us," Elena cried now. "Your own daughter." I protected myself from those who tried to drug me into signing legal documents. "We're going to sue." Julian stepped forward, poorly disguising his aggression. "We're going to challenge this." "You can't. It's irrevocable. It's done. Legally bulletproof." I looked him in the eyes without blinking. "Try to challenge it. Don't waste your money on lawyers. We've lived here for 5 years. We have rights. You have no rights to my money. You never did." Julian stormed out. Elena followed, sobbing. I went back to my study, reviewed the camera recording of the confrontation I had just captured, saved it with the date and time, and a label, evidence of reaction. The rage confirmed their guilt. The following week, the house became a battlefield. Doors slamming. Hostile silence. Calls to lawyers were overheard, all saying the same thing. The trust was solid, unshakable. On April 7th, Elena attempted reconciliation. She knocked on my study door, tears welling up. "Dad, we can fix this. I'm your daughter." My daughter would never have tried to poison me. It was a mistake. "Please leave my study." She left. I sat alone, staring at the wall, knowing what came next. The trust protected my money. Now, I needed to reclaim my house. I opened my notebook and wrote 4 words: "Get them out of the house." That same night, I called a real estate agent, Linda Moretti, recommended by my banker for her discretion and speed. "I want to sell my house. When can we list it?" "I can see it tomorrow morning. If it's as you describe, we could list it this weekend." April 8th. She arrived with a tape measure and a professional appraisal. I walked through the rooms where my daughter and son-in-law still lived, evaluating the market value of the house they were borrowing. A lovely property. I can list it for $7 million. This market moves fast, but the property must be vacant for showings. It will be. The listing went live on April 10th. First showings scheduled for April 12th. I notified Elena and Julian via text message. Showings Friday. "You'll need to be out for 3 hours." "You're selling the house?" Julian replied by text. "Yes." There was no response. They left on Friday morning, and when they returned, they found business cards from potential buyers on the kitchen counter. Their faces registered the comprehension that I was completely dismantling their life. On April 15th, I asked Harrison to draft the eviction notice formal, legal, final, giving them 60 days to vacate. I handed it to them that night as they sat in the living room, their borrowed living room. Julian read it, his face darkening. He tore it in half. "You can't evict us. This is our home." Read the notice. "Challenge it all you want. No lease. No rent. No tenant rights. 60 days. June 15th. We'll fight this. Try it." They hired a lawyer on April 16th. I listened to their consultation call via surveillance cameras. The lawyer's assessment matched Harrison's. If there's no lease, he has grounds. You live there by permission, which he is now revoking. Harrison filed the eviction lawsuit on April 20th. The court date was set for May 3rd, 3 weeks away. Meanwhile, I rented an apartment downtown, month-to-month lease. Oceanfront. Quiet. A clean place. No grudges. I moved out on April 28th. The house became hostile territory. I stayed mostly at the apartment, returning only for necessities. On each visit, the surveillance cameras captured their desperation. Elena crying, Julian raging, both calling lawyers who had no solutions. May 10th arrived. Miami-Dade Courthouse. 3rd floor. Eviction trial. Harrison and I sat at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, Elena, Julian, and their lawyer, young and overmatched. Aware he had no case, Judge Vance took the bench. A man in his 52nd, serious-looking, experienced in seeing people try to evade consequences. Their lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my clients have lived in this property for 5 years." "Under what agreement?" Judge Vance interrupted. "His family. The plaintiff is Ms. Sterling Fox's father." "That is not a lease agreement." "Do they pay rent?" "No." "Do they have a written lease?" "No, Your Honor." "Then they are guests without a contract." "Mr. Sterling has given appropriate 60-day notice." He looked at Harrison. "Yes." "Your Honor, served on April 15th. They have until June 15th to vacate." Judge Vance reviewed the documents. "I see no legal impediment to this eviction. The plaintiff is the owner of the property. The defendants have no lease or rental agreement. Notice was proper." He looked at Elena and Julian. "You have until June 15th. After that date, law enforcement can intervene." Motion granted. The gavel cracked. Final decision. In the hallway, Julian confronted me, his voice low and menacing. "You'll regret this. You're destroying your own family. I am removing those who poisoned me. We'll make you pay." "With what money?" I walked away, leaving him sputtering in the hallway. The next 5 weeks were a tense standoff. I stayed at the apartment. They remained in the house, packing slowly, desperately searching for rental properties they couldn't afford without my help. The surveillance cameras recorded endless arguments. Elena breaking down, Julian's fury at their complete defeat. On June 14th, I received confirmation. The buyer of the house had completed the inspection and the sale was approved for closing in August. Pending possession handover. June 15th was moving day. I arrived at the house at noon. A large moving truck was in the driveway loading furniture. Elena, eyes red, face haggard, gave instructions to the movers. Julian loaded boxes, his jerky movements reflecting contained fury. They didn't even greet me. I stood on the lawn watching them load their possessions. Everything I had bought for them. Everything they had accumulated during 5 years of living off my generosity. The truck pulled away at 4. They drove off in Julian's car without looking back. I entered the empty house, the echo of footsteps ringing on the hardwood floor. No furniture, no trace of them. No trace of poison in the air. Room by room, I walked through the reclaimed space. Marks on the walls where pictures once hung. Indentations in the carpet where furniture had been. The house felt like an empty shell, contaminated by what had happened inside, but finally blissfully empty. My phone vibrated. Harrison. Eviction completed. Ready to talk civil lawsuit, I stood in the center of the living room. My living room. Looking around at the emptiness. Selling the house would erase their presence completely. But first, one more legal action. One final blow. I texted back. Yes. Let's schedule a meeting for Monday. It's time for this to be definitive. I wrote my reply to Harrison. Yes. Let's schedule the meeting for Monday. It was time for this to be permanently on the record. The empty living room surrounded me. No furniture. Just the hardwood floor and the echo. I sat down, my back against the wall, laptop resting on my knees, and opened the evidence folders one last time. Months of documentation, surveillance recordings ordered by date, hospital medical records, Matteo's statement, Veronica's reports, every conversation, every attempt at manipulation, every proof that what happened to me was not paranoia, but premeditated exploitation. I created a final chronological document, printed everything, and organized it into a tabbed, expanding folder. Each item told part of the story. Taken together, they were undeniable. On Monday morning, June 16th, I met Harrison in his office. He spread the evidence across the conference table as if it were an indictment. Civil lawsuit under Florida Statute 825.103, Harrison said, taking notes. Elder exploitation, financial manipulation, attempted battery by drugging, coercion, aggravated emotional distress, fraud, conspiracy, seeking $500,000 in damages plus costs. This isn't about money, I said. I know. It's about public record documenting what they did. He looked up from his notes. You want consequences? Exactly. We filed the complaint on June 17th. Elena and Julian received the court notification in their new apartment, a small two-bedroom unit in a neighborhood far removed from the luxury of Coral Gables. The process server reported they had barely unpacked. Their lawyer contacted Harrison a few days later, his voice tight on the speakerphone. My clients can't afford this. They're already ruined. They should have considered that before attempting to drug and defraud their benefactor, Harrison replied coldly. Discovery began. Harrison requested their financial records. Bank statements revealed the truth. No savings. Living paycheck to paycheck on credit cards. Drowning in debt created by their life expectations. On June 28th, the settlement offer arrived. I met Harrison in his office to review it. $50,000 payment plan. Private admission of guilt. No trial. It's reasonable, Harrison said cautiously. They clearly can't pay the full judgment, but the settlement would be confidential. No public record. I slid the papers back across his desk. No. I want this to be public. I want it on the court records forever. Trial is risky. The judge could award less compensation. I don't care about the money. I care about the record. I looked him in the eyes. They tried to destroy me. I want official record that they were wrong and I was right. Harrison nodded slowly. Then we go to trial. July became the month of preparation. Matteo confirmed he would testify. The hospital doctor provided an expert affidavit. Veronica prepared the surveillance evidence for court presentation. I gave a deposition. Hours of questions answered under oath, laying the factual foundation. July 25th. Preliminary hearing. The judge set the trial date for July 28th. That Monday morning dawned clear and hot. I dressed in my best suit and arrived early at the Miami-Dade County Courthouse. Judge Hastings presided. She was in her 50 seconds. Known for her impartiality and strong rulings, Harrison had recommended a bench trial instead of a jury trial. Judges understand elder law better than average citizens, he explained. Opening statements. Harrison presented the timeline and evidence summary with meticulous precision. Their lawyer, young and out of his depth, argued that a family misunderstanding had been exaggerated. Mateo testified first. He described the restaurant incident with full conviction. I saw Mrs. So. Sterling Fox pour something from a small vial into Mr. Sterling's wine glass while he was away from the table. Clear. Liquid. Deliberate action. Their lawyer attempted cross-examination. Could you have been mistaken? No. I know what I saw. I couldn't keep quiet. The hospital doctor explained the diazepam analysis results. Dosage. Dangers. Veronica presented the surveillance methodology, chain of custody, and authentication of the recordings. Day 2, July 29th. The surveillance video played on the courtroom screen. Their own voices filled the space, discussing competency issues, planning Elias's consultation, and celebrating their supposed progress toward the inheritance. Julian said, "He's 63, not lucid anymore." Elena's voice said, "We deserve this money." I watched Judge Hastings take notes, her expression serious and focused. Elena testified, crying. She admitted to the restaurant incident, but claimed she only wanted him to listen to her about important papers. Julian testified. Defensive and hostile. He blamed me for overreacting to a family conflict. Then it was my turn. The witness stand felt solemn, formal, everyone watching me. I stated my name, my age, and my relationship to the defendants. I answered Harrison's questions calmly and precisely. Restaurant surveillance, trust creation, eviction. I presented the evidence one by one. Cross-examination became aggressive. Aren't you being vengeful? Mr. Sterling, I'm seeking accountability. There's a difference. Judge Hastings asked her own question. Why pursue a civil suit after fiduciary protection and eviction? I looked straight at her. Because what they did was wrong. It needs to be on public record for my protection, as a precedent for the truth. July 30th. Closing arguments. Harrison, this is a textbook case of elder exploitation. Attempted battery by drugging. Financial manipulation. Psychological coercion. The evidence is overwhelming. Their lawyer. Family conflict and poor judgment. Yes, but not criminal exploitation. Judge Hastings closed her notebook. I will issue the ruling in writing in 2 weeks. I left the courthouse in the late afternoon heat with the satisfaction of having completed my task. I spoke the truth publicly, presented the evidence. Now justice would decide if the truth mattered. 2 weeks of waiting. 2 weeks wondering if the system would validate what I had suffered or dismiss it as family drama. I returned to my temporary apartment, watched the sunset over Biscayne Bay, and waited for the world to confirm what I already knew, that I had been right to protect myself, to defend myself, to demand justice. August 15th. The dawn light filtered over the ocean outside my balcony. Coffee steamed in my hand. Bitter. Familiar. Comforting. 2 weeks after the trial ended, the phone rang at 9. Mr. Sterling. Harrison. We have the verdict. I sat down. The infinite ocean stretching out before me. The judge ruled in your favor. Total victory. Clear and convincing evidence of elder exploitation, attempted financial fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress was found. Judgment for $350,000 plus court costs, $75,000 in punitive damages, $425,000 total. The number seemed abstract. There's more, Harrison continued. Permanent restraining order. They are prohibited from contacting you directly or indirectly. No calls. No letters. No communications through third parties. Violation results in contempt charges. And the payment? They have nothing. Court-ordered payment plan. Garnishment of future wages until the debt is settled could take years. But the judgment is public record. Searchable permanent documentation of what they attempted. That's what I wanted. Not the money. Documentation. Validation. Public record that I wasn't paranoid or cruel. That I was the victim of an attack. And I had every right to defend myself. Thank you, Harrison, for everything. You did the work. I just legalized it. After hanging up, I sat watching the sunrise. The written opinion arrived by email an hour later. I read every page. Judge Hastings wrote, "The evidence presented demonstrates the premeditated exploitation of an elderly person by those in positions of trust. The incident at the restaurant, the attempt to drug someone to facilitate document signing, constitutes a felony in itself. Subsequent surveillance recordings reveal ongoing manipulation and planning. This court finds the defendant's actions reprehensible and deserving of the maximum civil sanctions." Reprehensible. Maximum penalty. Public document. I printed the opinion and filed it. One more document in a case now closed. On August 16th, I closed on the sale of the Coral Gables house. Sold to a young family for $2.75 million. They will never know what happened within those walls. They will fill it with different memories, different lives, different futures. That same day, I bought a downtown apartment. 10th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Ocean views to the horizon. $850,000 cash purchase from the house sale. Modern. Impeccable. No history. I moved in on August 18th. Furniture arrived and was simply placed. Nothing excessive. Nothing unnecessary. The space felt like taking a breath after being underwater. August 20th. Last meeting with Veronica in her Pinewood office. The certification still hung on the wall. "Case closed," she said, handing me a USB drive. All the surveillance recordings, reports, and documentation. Go on the record that I thank you for everything. You made it easy. They were predictable. She stood and extended her hand. Take care. Mr. Sterling. We shook hands. The matter concluded. The professional relationship was over. On August 22nd, I sat on my new balcony, phone in hand. I searched for Elena's contact, my finger hovering over the screen. Delete contact. A confirmation box popped up. I pressed yes. Her name vanished. Julian's followed. Both disappeared from my phone, from my life, from my future. The restraining order legally barred them from communication. Even if they wanted to apologize, reconcile, or explain, the law prevented it. 3 years minimum. Enough time for life to move on without them. I felt nothing. Neither satisfaction nor sadness. Just a serene peace. On August 23rd and 24th, I established new routines. Coffee on the balcony in the morning. Walks by the sea in the afternoon. Reading at night with the sound of the ocean drifting through the open windows. I called old friends I had neglected during the chaos. Made lunch plans. Reconnected. And rebuilt my social life outside of surveillance and legal battles. On August 25th, the sunset painted the sky in layers. Orange blending into purple. Then deep blue. I stood on my balcony, coffee cooling in my hand, watching the day turn into night. 6 months since February. Since that restaurant. Since Matteo's warning. The glass switch. And everything that followed. I protected my assets through the trust. Evicted them from my house. Held them accountable with a civil judgment. And put their exploitation on public record. I won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. Like emerging from dark waters and realizing I was still breathing. My daughter had tried to poison me. That truth weighed on me. Unchangeable. But I refused to be a victim. I refused to accept the manipulation. I refused to let trust make me vulnerable to destruction. The ocean stretched infinitely. The horizon line crisp and defined. Somewhere in the city behind me, Elena and Julian lived with the consequences. A court debt that would follow them for years. A public record that affected their job applications and background checks. A restraining order that prevented them from spinning their story or seeking reconciliation on their own terms. I didn't hate them. Hate required energy, attention, emotional dedication, all that I had dedicated to documentation, preparation, and legal battles. Now I only had peace. The sun touched the horizon. The colors deepened, and the city lights began to twinkle behind me. My coffee was cold, but I didn't move to refill it. I simply stood there, watching the cycle of nature continue, oblivious to human drama. I built an empire from nothing, sold it for $30 million, protected $25 million through an unshakable trust, lost a daughter, but saved myself. I found justice in the courts, and peace in separation. Some stories end with family reunions, forgiveness, and healing. This one ended with distance, documentation, and the relief of being safe. The sun disappeared behind the ocean, darkness settling around me. I finished my cold coffee, left the cup on the balcony railing, and watched the stars appear. Tomorrow I would call my former partner about that consulting opportunity. Next week, I would have lunch with friends. Eventually, I would date, travel, and fill my days with something other than litigation. But tonight I simply stood here, Free, protected, alone, but not lonely. The ocean whispered against the shore below. The city hummed with its infinite rhythm. Life went on, indifferent to individual struggles, offering new days to those who survived old battles. I had survived, and that was enough. If you liked this story, please hit like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box to the left. Thank you for watching.